What up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Thank you for joining us for another edition of your favorite podcast, the Charles Coleman Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Coleman. So happy to have you. So glad you're here. Wonderful show lined up for you today, and really, really excited about all the things we've got to talk about. But before we get into it, I want to encourage everyone, if you're at home or you're on the go, you're on your phone, you're on your tablet, you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Need you to subscribe, like, and share the show with everybody you know. If you're listening to us anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, anywhere where podcasts are found and heard, iTunes, Tidal, Spotify, we're on all of that. So subscribe, follow, you'll get exclusive content. Anytime we drop, you'll know ahead of everybody else because you will subscribe and you will follow. So hit that button now and follow the Charles Coleman Podcast. Got a good show today lined up as usual. You know, that's what we do. That's what we do here. That's what we bring you. Today, we're going to talk a lot of fun stuff, but we got some political stuff to talk, a lot of different things going on. Of course, in the studio on set, I've got the dream team of contributors, which I love. And one of my favorite go-to, we the give and go combination, the worthy and magic combination of the podcast space. I got my man Cashmere Kurt on the couch. Join us again. Yo, every time you do that point shit, it like bugs me out. But I'm glad to have you on the couch again, bro. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for the invite.
For another edition. Absolutely. Before we get started, you know, I was on my phone, and one of my favorite stories from this year, and I don't know why it's one of my favorite stories, but it's just such a ratchet ass story. Did you hear, this was a little while ago, this was a couple of months ago, a couple of weeks ago, there was a 60-person brawl on a cruise ship that started from a threesome going bad.
What?
Can't make this up.
60-person brawl.
60 people got into a fight.
Over a threesome?
Over a threesome.
What, they was online or something?
Nah, they were on the cruise ship. Now, I don't know if the
threesome... This makes sense to me, man.
Bro, I don't know if the threesome happened on the cruise ship, but I know that the fight did. And it was 60 people. And all I can think about is like one person had like 20 folks, another person had 20 folks.
That's an even fight.
Word. 60 people get into, like, it was just like described as like basically somebody cheated on somebody. So it was somebody who was outside of the threesome, apparently.
That happened to be on the boat.
That was on the boat. They get into it over this threesome.
Did the threesome happen on the boat?
I don't know. I don't know.
60 people fighting. Did that in the buffet section? They just had this threesome?
Jack, listen, Jack. 60 people get into a fight. Like, they described it, like it's almost like one of those old westerns where like somebody punches somebody and bumps somebody and then they start fighting. And it's a big ball of smoke. And they get into the fight.
That's crazy.
It's like I'm fascinated by this story.
It's crazy.
Like, I'm like, yo, all right, this happened on a cruise ship that left from New York. It's 60 people. I gotta know somebody.
Definitely.
I need the inside scoop.
Somebody was on that boat.
Somebody was on that boat. Yo, if you was on the boat, hit us up. Charles Coleman Podcast. We on all the socials. Hit me up personally on the gram. I want to know this. If you were on the boat, the 60-person brawl, even if you wasn't one of the 60, I would love to hear from one of the three. I would love to hear from one of the three. But if I can't hear from one of the three,
somebody,
come on.
Somebody.
Throw me a bone, please. Like
60 people fighting over a threesome?
60 people over a threesome going bad.
Where do we get that report from? Like, who reported that?
Oh, no, it was in the news, man. It's a legit story. Like, because I remember reading it and I had to check the source because I thought.
So this isn't fake news.
This is not fake news. This is total. If you look up 60-person cruise brawl on Google right now, it will come up. I do not. This is a real story.
This is crazy.
This is a real story.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to get into the show. It's absurd. But that is actually, you know, it's indicative of, as we get to our shortcuts, like this complete lack of morality where we are, right? Like we're just in this space of like complete like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm.
And, you know, when you and I have these conversations, you're always like, oh, it's not going down. You're always like, oh, it's not happening. Like it's not going to change. And I'm never sure that I agree with you. But when I think about stuff like that, you might be right. Like, where do we got rap lyrics. There's a rap lyric I was just listening to. It's that something pink talking about female genitalia. Something pink, call it breast cancer. First of all, there were two body parts that had nothing to do with one another, other than the fact that they're both on a woman. But then like, you throw breast cancer in, it just, what are we doing, bro? Like, what are we, 60 people get to
I mean, that's a bar. It's a play on the word pink.
Is it a bar?
It's a bar.
Yeah. All right. You know what? I'm going to put that down for a second. It's time for Smooth as Cashmere, our segment where we allow Kurt some time to wax poetic, get into what he wants to get into, and talk about what he wants to talk about. So, Kurt, what are we talking about today?
Today, let's discuss pandemic spending. Everybody that's posting on Instagram right now has a product. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Everybody's selling everything.
A couple of people done got me too. Like,
really?
I mean, not got me, but like, I've been like late night surfing, like, oh, that look cool.
Any bad experiences?
I generally am averse to pulling the trigger on like real dumb, like real dumb. But like, it's been a couple times where I'm like, maybe I do need some ripcord camouflage jumpsuit reversible clothes, right? You know what I'm saying? But I generally avoid it, but I definitely have seen an uptick of like life hack. You need this, so on and so forth. And the marketing is pretty creative because it'll get you if you ain't really paying attention.
I've been noticing a lot of this like self-help stuff. Everybody's like a motivational speaker kind of a thing now. And I'm kind of wondering, is it a result of everyone being so down during the pandemic that everyone now wants to emerge as a new age Instagram pastor now? You know what I mean? Or
how are people monetizing? Like I know that I've seen an abundance of, you know, I'm gonna put this quote up or make this like real happy meme or whatever. But I'm just wondering, you know, I feel like there's a lot of steps between I'm somebody on Instagram who comes up, hey, peace family. I want to just say these words of encouragement for you today. Like from that to like, I got to check. How are they monetizing?
That's a good question. I think there are bigger companies out there that are using their sound bites.
The Russians?
The Russians. Putin and his crew.
Yeah, he said the bigger companies. You mean the Russians?
Take it easy.
Right.
We just started now.
Yeah.
Damn.
Putin, I don't want no smoke.
Jeez.
I don't want
Putin and Beehive, we are friendlies.
We are. We don't want no smoke. Promise you, Putin, we don't want no smoke. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My man Vlad.
Shout out. And the horse.
And the horse you rode in.
Literally.
My bad. Go ahead, bro.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know how they're getting money, but somebody's getting the check because it's too much happening. Whenever you see things on a level of redundancy that we're seeing online, that means there's some checks flying out there somewhere.
Well, I think the pandemic has, for better or for worse, encouraged people to pursue their dreams. So I've seen an uptick of smaller boutique clothing brands that have come up with people who are selling stuff like in the pandemic. And I'm not really mad at that. The only thing I'm like is, so you had a hot idea. Are you committed to it? Like, are you committed to like seeing it through and making it happen, fulfilling these orders and shipping it out and then coming up with new designs and then making sure that you have inventory and, you know, scaling your business to grow? Or are you just trying to sell some t-shirts for a couple weeks?
I think it's the latter. I think with the whole shutdown of the world, there are a lot of manufacturing companies that just had product that they had to sit on that they now clearly had to give away at a discounted rate. And people are just capitalizing on that abundance of material that's just laying around that's quite frankly been paid for already. Yeah. That people just kind of chuck to the side and say, you know what, we'll jump on the next. Right.
We'll eat that.
So now with that, more people are saying, hey, I can be a store now.
Yeah, I don't have to be a brick and mortar.
No, I can be.
I haven't had to be a brick and mortar for years.
I have the plug to the yoga pants. Let's get rich.
Word. So, what do you think it does to consumers, though?
I think it waters down the appetite of what you want because there's so many different choices and options, right? I think the thing that most people really desire is the least obtainable, right?
Okay.
And that used to be labels and names,
right?
But now it's more so ideas of how you want to look or what you want to buy that you may not necessarily know it exists or not.
What is that? Like, what does that mean?
Like myself. I've always wanted...
Me, myself, I generally say, yeah.
Yeah, when I say self,
Yeah.
I've always wanted a Glen Plaid linen suit.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever seen that?
No.
Right. But we know it exists.
Right?
Yeah,
I definitely, now that, what you just described is something I experienced myself because I think about different designs. I'm not a designer, but I am someone who's style conscious, at least. I'm like, yo, if I had a Burberry trench coat with a houndstooth lining, ain't nobody seen that before, but I know it exists. I'm like, where can I find it?
And now we're in a space where you can make it.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, do you think that the very unexplored space of like, when I say unexplored, I mean that we haven't had enough time passed to actually study and survey conclusively the long-term effects of the pandemic, but the mental health piece of the pandemic, what do you think that does to consumer habits and consumer spending? Like you're far more of an economist than I am. But I just, in terms, I asked the question because I feel like this is a very conflicting space. Like people have really hesitated to use the word recession, but clearly the Fed is trying to stop us from spending so much money and buying shit. But I think part of the reason why people are buying shit is because they don't feel good.
Right.
And I think part of that is connected to the pandemic. And I think that, it's very hard to still be in the pandemic. You got the president catching COVID, so it ain't going nowhere, right? And tell people, like, don't do or resort to the techniques that you have used to cope for as long as you've used them. But again, I ain't no economist. You probably have a much greater sense than I.
Well, I have a weird opinion about it. So I look at our spending behavior prior to the pandemic as almost like an enraged dog, right? The super duper aggressive pit bull that you got on the huge chain that you know you can't let go.
Tyrone.
Right? So everybody's looking at this dog like, yo, like, make sure you hold that dog. You know what I'm saying?
Hold that dog or cross the street.
Exactly. So that was the manufacturers. They're looking at the dog like, yo, chill out. You know what I'm saying?
Why? Because it was too much?
It was
too aggressive?
It was super duper aggressive, and it made everyone. I'm gonna use a word whenever I think of money and people, the word coward always pop into my head first, right? And it's almost like, when it comes to finances or anything, when it comes to acquisition, right? You have someone who has the fiscal power to do something, but they don't have the balls, right? And then you'll have someone who don't have enough that's saying, go get it. Right? And those two things, right? Both are cowards in my head because you're not willing to do the work to get the fiscal fortitude to be able to go out and do it the way you telling everybody else to go do it. And you've done all those things like that, but you just scared to pull the trigger. You already aim, never fire type of person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in that space, the dog now represents the whole idea of the person who was neither one of those who were actually out here doing what we're talking about, right?
Okay.
So now the product or the manufacturer is now like, if we let that dog go, we may not have enough fight
in us to hold them off.
Right. So now that's when you start getting this whole, slow down and let's
stop buying so much.
Right. Or the way we counter that is because we can't stop you from buying. That's not real. So we're just gonna slow down on production. So now if you want to buy, you're paying twice as much for it. But we don't have to deal with the pit bull because We got 8. That's it. We only got 8.
Yeah.
You bought all 7. That's on you. You deal with the other pit bulls out there.
You deal with that.
Not us.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of weird. It's weird.
One thing I want to ask you about, this is not off topic,
Mhm.
but it was actually supposed to be in our shortcuts. You triggered me when you talked about sustainability
Mhm.
and sort of like the supply chain. Very similar in the airline industry.
Okay.
It's a really big conversation now, especially I just read a story on a website, a credible one, that talked about flight attendants who are now speaking out about the fact that like the space that they're in is not sustainable from a workforce standpoint. A lot of airlines laid off people and bought out people during the quarantine because it was just so massive
Mm-hmm.
in terms of not being able to shut down, but then not being able to operate at full strength. And so at the time, it was a really, really short-sighted fix to an industry that really so many of us depend on for so much.
Right.
And now that things have picked up, and by picked up, I mean now that people just really don't give up and they just outside
Right.
traveling, I think we all know the story. I could tell at least 3 stories of, my flight got canceled because some folks timed out, or
Mhm.
we had to, wait for the crew to show up because the other crew wasn't available, or, the travel industry right now, the airline industry is very much so feeling the effects of that lack of sustainability
Mhm.
that you talked about from a marketplace standpoint. But what I find interesting about that piece, the airline piece, the travel piece, is that's not an industry where there's production. It's a service industry. So even service industries are in a lot of different ways experiencing those challenges that really come from this shift in market demand
Mhm.
in ways that aren't just limited to production, your clothing, your
Mhm.
textiles, your
Mhm.
manufacturers. And stuff
Well,
like
again, like everything else in the world, once you've created a narrative that people can buy into, it trickles down into everything.
that.
Nothing just stays the way it was intended to be, right? Everything it's like a splatter of paint. You may have wanted it to hit this particular brick on the wall, but you threw a lot of paint.
You throw a lot of
You
paint.
threw a lot of paint. So how do you tell that other brick up there that it's not red?
You don't
now?
get no paint.
Exactly. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's one of the flaws sometimes of popular opinion, right? It's like when you give someone an avenue to connect to something, you can't get mad when they do.
And you can't control.
You can never control.
Just like we can't control everybody who watches the Charles Coleman podcast, and we don't want to. We want everybody to watch. We want everybody to check us out. So, Cashmere Kurt, thank you for that. We appreciate you. Smooth as Cashmere, one of my favorite segments on the show. We're going to move on to our main conversation today. I want us to have an honest discussion. All right. We got midterms coming up. And this is a tricky space for me because it's a space where I operate. Like I work in this space. But I'm also around real people. And so I want you to be real. Like I'm not going to sit here in front of this camera, in front of this microphone and be a votep. Oh, you got to go vote. So and so forth. I have legitimate arguments that I can make in favor of voting. No question about it. And I likely will bring some up during the discussion. But the point here is I'm not trying to sell anything to listeners about the importance of voting. That is a personal decision. There are pros to it. I won't say there are cons, but I understand why people have an aversion to it conceptually. Midterms are coming. I'm asking you, someone who doesn't work in the space, someone who may not necessarily, read the news all the time and all of that. Do you care? Like, I'm not criticizing. I just really want to know, like real talk.
When you say care, do I care about the possibility of change? Do I care about politics? Do I care about...
Midterms are coming. And are you like, I'll probably go? Are you like, absolutely, I must be there. It is my civic duty. Or are you like, what midterm?
I'm the latter. What midterm?
What midterm?
Yeah.
Got it. Why do you think that you're that I don't want to say disaffected, because again, that even comes across as judgy.
Mm-hmm.
And I without a doubt, I don't care what they tell you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that people who are listening and watching to this, that there are a lot of people who either had not thought about voting, kind of sort of probably might, maybe won't.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people who are like, I guess I'm going to do it just because.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not judging, nor am I disillusioned to believe that everyone here listens. It's like, I absolutely voting.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's some people like that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not really talking to them because they're going to do what they're going to do.
Right.
I just want to understand from you, Joe Blow, the lover man,
Mm-hmm.
right? What would make you shift that position? One way or the other.
I think more information. I think people, well, myself and others who think like me, there's no real connection to midterms. Yes, for those of us who still have the ability to vote, there's a civic duty to exercise that right. But to what degree, right? If I'm going to go out and cast a vote about stuff that I really don't know nothing about because it's been explained to me that it's my civic duty.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but am I qualified? I would say no.
I'm really glad you said that. And I'm glad you said that because I once got in some trouble. I got a lot of pushback because I personally said that the idea of someone who is an uneducated or undereducated voter going into the ballot box is almost as dangerous as giving a person with zero aim a loaded firearm, right? A zero aim and an itchy trigger finger, a loaded firearm. And people were like, that's such a really irresponsible thing to say. Voting is a civic duty. See, in our community, the problem I have is we engage the action of voting as a civic duty with the assumption that when you vote, you're going to go vote for the candidate that I want.
Right.
Like if I guarantee you, if there was a legitimate belief that it was a possibility that the people in our community would go out and vote for 45 again, or vote for Trump, or vote for conservative candidates, or vote for Republicans. I don't know, and I'm pretty sure that the message of go vote, just vote, would not be as prominent in our community as it is. I think that we emphasize that in a very unsophisticated way. And part of why we do that is because it's the assumption that you're going to do the Democratic Party line at every election and you're not going to do the research. And even if you don't do the research, it's okay because once you go into that ballot and you see that Democratic line,
that's the one you pick.
That's the one you pick. So that's why people are okay with this very surface level conversation that lacks any nuance or sophistication around accountability, around non-negotiables, around how to, follow up with candidates, around donating to candidates and spending money where a candidate aligns with your values and how to influence that before and after an election. Like none of that is explored.
No.
And I think that that's very intentional. And I find something almost insidious about that in a way that really irks my nerves every 4 years or every 2 years when there's this big push to vote, but the effort around voter education typically is not as great. I know some wonderful people who are in the space. Shout out L. Joy Williams, who does Civic Sundays. Shout out Stephanie Brown, she and her husband are doing amazing things with their political action committee. There are a lot of folks who are in the space who are looking to do it, but in mass, our voter education efforts, our voter mobilization efforts are lacking in real sophistication. And I think that really, what you said is demonstrative of that. Like you said, it's information. Now I'm gonna keep it a buck with you, right? It's 2022 and we got Google. You can find out whatever you want to find out. The information exists. I'm not going to go as far as to say like, yeah, well, we don't even be knowing what these candidates be about, son. Well, we don't, but that's not the candidate's fault in every case. It's somewhat on us in that there is access to the information. The missing piece, as I see it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there hasn't been a consistent effort to explain the connection between why you need to take advantage of this access or why it's important or why it actually matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the action. It's not like, yo, you need to, really take advantage of accessing this information so that you can make an informed decision.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that people are concerned about is the decision, not why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that does a very big disservice to us and how we engage political processes overall, and why consistently midterm elections do not have good turnout.
I was thinking too, though, it could be the bigger 4-year elections that turn into clusterfucks that kind of make the 2-year elections seem like they're less significant.
Yeah, and I think that there's validity in that. Like, I think that our political discourse currently is a shit show entirely, right? Like, it's polarized in a way that rewards people being disagreeable and not actually working together and not actually getting things done. That does not work. It does not make the system work. And so I respect and understand when people are like, all of that shit is a game. It's all a mess. It's all rigged, and it's all just messy. And I ain't really fooling with it because I got real things that I got to worry about in my life every day.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. Like, I get that perspective. I think what I don't like about our discourse is, I use this analogy a lot. You go into a store, you want something to drink. The cashier has Coke and Pepsi. They say, you got to choose one or the other. And you say, I think I want some Sprite. Or I think I want water.
Mm-hmm.
What we do as a community oftentimes is we get mad at the consumer in that instance. The buyer who says, I don't like these choices and therefore I'm going to refrain or do something different. As opposed to getting mad at the store for not having a greater,
more choices,
better choices. And I really think that that is another missing part of the discourse. You are more inclined to see, or more likely to see, someone getting blasted because they said, I didn't vote because I didn't like the candidate, versus a mass movement to either of the two major parties, to say, why do your candidates suck? Like, to me, I don't blame the consumer in that respect because they have a choice.
Right.
They don't like the choices. I value my vote.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to just give that away to either someone who I believe hasn't earned it, or isn't worth it, or doesn't do as a candidate what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just going to give it to one because they did less shitty shit than someone.
Right. The lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not here to be preachy, bro. Like, that's not what we on. I'm intentionally engaging that process. What you said from a perspective standpoint, I understand. You're like, I'm not informed enough to be intentional about engaging this process. And because I'm not informed enough to make an intentional decision and an informed decision, an educated decision, I don't really know if I'm really going to fool with it. To me, that is much more honorable, respectful, or it's respectable than to say, yeah, I'm just going to go vote and think that that's the thing that people want to hear. Yeah, Democrat. Mm-hmm. I think and to think that that's the thing people want to hear. Of course, there's always going to be the alternative of, well, you could take the time to educate yourself, but then I would respond to the average person, why? Give them a reason. Why? Give them a reason. You haven't made that connection for the average person in such a way that midterms matter. They're going to look at, and that's not at all by accident, it's very intentional. They're going to look at the presidential election and they're going to say, yeah, this is what we want. This is where I got to focus. That's the heavyweight bout, right? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, all these fights on the undercard, all these races on the undercard, all these judges, all these other positions are likely going to have an impact on your life in a greater way. But if nobody explains that to you and they don't make it relevant, you got to make it relevant. And that's one thing about, I think, our current discourse that we don't do a good job of. Like, voting for us is much more ritual than it is practice. And there's a difference. Ritual is something that you do just because you're taught to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Practice is something that you do with intention because you know what you're doing.
Right.
Ritual is like, I'm LeBron James. I walk up, I put the powder in my hand, I throw it up before every game. That's ritual. I have a ritual of doing that. Practice is I'm shooting these jump shots every day. Why? Because I got to get better at that part of my game.
Mm-hmm.
We don't engage voting enough from a practice conversation. We engage it from a ritual conversation. Mm-hmm. People die for you to have the right to vote. That's more ritual.
You think so?
Yeah, because that doesn't give you a actual practical purpose, a reason. People die for you to have the right to vote. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
That means it's important.
Okay.
That means it's meaningful.
Okay.
That means it's symbolic. All things that are consistent with the idea of ritual. But it doesn't tell me anything about like what it's supposed to do.
Or how to do it.
Or how to do it.
I got
or
you.
Why to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's not a real practical reason. And I think that in today's day and age, the old sort of idioms around that are just not enough. So,
well, I'm actually a different question. Being someone who, if I had a question about who I should vote for, I would probably call you, right?
Okay.
So in that, do you think our understanding of the privilege of voting is somewhat tied to how we view ourselves in being represented as a people in this country?
Ooh, that's a really, really, really layered one. I think that the connection that people make in our community is not necessarily about how we view ourselves, but about how it more so the limits to what representation and advocacy can get for us. Not necessarily that we don't deserve strong representation or that we'll never get strong representation, but just the idea of, I think many of us believe and are convinced that no matter how hard you fight for us, there's always going to be a ceiling. No matter how effective you may be, no matter how much of a champion or an advocate you are for our people, the system is rigged and the game is already sold. So there's not room for effectiveness. That in turn, that lack of confidence in those systems, then in turn makes people apathetic to be like, it really ain't gonna make no difference. It's not personal against the individual, like the candidate. And it's not necessarily a commentary about ourselves, like we don't deserve that. It's more so a lack of confidence in the system where it's like, yo, this shit is rigged. So that being said, I do encourage all of you to think about your civic duty as a voter and to educate yourself about what's going on. I would rather you be an intentional abstinee than someone who just engages for the purposes of saying that you did. Know what you're doing and be intentional about it. I know that a lot of people would disagree with me about that. That's okay. Hit me up. Leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think. It's all good. So we're going to move on into our next segment, our conversations about love, sex, and relationships. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, rules of engagement. My man, Cashmere. Kurt, what's going on, Kurt?
Ain't nothing. What's going on with you?
I'm good, brother. How you feeling?
A little triggered, but I'll be all right.
Triggered?
Yes, sir.
What's got you triggered?
This damn raw mattress you got hanging up in here.
I mean, what's wrong with the mattress?
Man, this look like one I lost my virginity on.
A raw mattress?
A raw mattress. And I went raw, too. Nah, I'm joking.
So I got a question. Again, this is rules of engagement. So, anything goes. But I have a fun question.
Okay.
You are a guy who deals with valuations and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So have you ever had a situation where you met a woman
Mm-hmm.
and the ROI was just not what you thought. In terms of like what you put in, like she was one of those, like she hit you with the typical, I'm worth the wait. Because you know we've all heard that one.
The 90-day demons.
I don't know what you call it. The 90 day. I didn't have a name for them.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that like it's a red flag.
Okay.
Because anytime you tell me I'm worth the wait, you probably not.
Ooh.
Like you probably not. Like that's just been my experience and those of many of my homies. Like, oh, I'm worth the wait is like dead giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
like you meet someone and they just want you to put in hella work. Like hella work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get there and you're like, wait, this
for this?
Right. Wait, for this?
Word.
This it?
That's it.
You not bringing nobody?
It's just you? All this for that?
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever been in that situation?
Yes, I've been in that situation.
When did you so here's a question. When did you realize it? And did you pull your investment or did you double down? Because sometimes you double down because you're like, no, I'm finna get my money, well, not my money's worth, but I'm gonna get my efforts worth out of it.
Yeah, it's usually a double down type of perspective.
So you're a double down guy.
Yeah, because again, once you realize, ladies, for those listening, if a man begins to believe that he's invested too much in there, you're already dead in the water. It's already over. So he's gonna double down
just
at that point
to tell himself
for the acquisition. I have to.
I got to.
I got to at this point.
If not, I'm a sucker.
I'm worse than a sucker. I'm gonna take this L. Yeah. So I might as well just do what I got to do, sop up the rest of this loss, and get up out of here.
You ever just took the L and been like, yo, I'm underwater. She's not worth it. I'm disappointed, but it's charged to the game. You ever had that?
They become best friends.
Oh, what?
Yeah. How women have friend zones, men got friend zones too.
You friend zone them after. See, I think women generally friend zone before. That's like they make it up front.
You think so?
I think so. Yeah.
I think men put themselves in that situation.
Or what I'm saying is they usually, typically, I don't find it to be the case that women like decide to be intimate with you and then they be like, nah, now I'm a friend zone you. I've never had that.
You've never heard of that neither?
Nah.
Really?
Up front, for sure. But like on the back end?
Back end.
Nah, on the back end, like, you know what, Puddin'? We should be friends.
No?
I ain't never been hit with that one.
Nah, I never been hit with it, but I've seen a lot of dudes that are real close to joints that they used to take down, and they're now friends. Yeah.
How does that work?
It's weird, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
No. See, what we're talking about is the experience was less than par.
Mm-hmm.
It was a subpar experience, and because of that, the woman's like, we're not doing that anymore.
Correct.
But we could be friends. So you think that the dudes who are close to women who they used to take down, that's what happened?
I believe so. I believe that there was an exchange that was subpar, and this was the consolation prize.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you've done that?
Yes.
So how do you get around them coming back and being like, so Big Daddy, let's get back in the sack?
It's not possible.
Which is not possible.
That attraction level is gone.
I'm here.
But that attraction level is gone. That's behind
For
us.
you.
Right. It takes two.
But I'm just saying, how do you negotiate that with her without leaving her feeling like,
I mean, I've been
emotional damage. Like, how do you negotiate that without that part?
Again, we have to be adults about these adult situations and decisions we're making. At the end of the day.
That just sound real smooth with your voice, but if you don't got your voice, that shit don't work.
You don't think so?
No, I don't. I know so.
I mean, again, I don't really know how to explain it for someone else, but for me, there's boundaries.
You said boundaries.
Yeah.
Clearly.
You ain't just gonna be pulling my pants down, you know what I mean?
Well, and there it is. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us for another edition of the Charles Coleman Podcast. You've been listening to Rules of Engagement. This is the new home for Black Brilliance. This is your new favorite podcast. Like, subscribe, follow, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. You agree, you disagree, kind of, sort of, maybe not. And share with your friends.